From a professional soccer career to becoming a driving force in the mortgage industry, Brian Covey has shown what it takes to find your competitive edge. Get off the sidelines and get in the game. Find your competitive edge with Brian Covey.
Welcome back to another edition of Finding Your Competitive Edge with Brian Covey. So I'm excited today because along our journey, we get to meet really cool people. And Nicole is one of those. And I met her when we were over in one of Ken Jocelyn's masterminds and happened to be in Puerto Rico. And we connected up right away. I think it was the energy, what she was sharing and talking about. And today we're going to unpack not just about leadership. So you're going to find some of Nicole's backgrounds in the pastoral world, right? So you guys know my dad being a pastor, near and dear to my heart, but also leading companies. And so if you're an aspiring leader, you're leading a team today, or you just one day say, hey, you know what? I want to do more for myself as a leader and grow personally. You could be serving in communities or at your church or somewhere. You're going to want to tune in today because I took not only a page of notes, but I've reflected back on them since then. So you're going to want to do the same today. Buckle up. We're going to have some free resources for you, and we're going to dive in right away. So Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited too, because I know we got a lot of similar friends, and you're telling me about Tim's story and some of these guys that you've worked with and all of this, and just your background, one being a female pastor and then working with churches like you have. I've got some friends that used to be pastors. I say, you didn't used to be, you still are. You just happen to be doing something else out in the field, like Ken, like one of my friends, Cody. And I think you've done that. So let's talk about a little bit of your background to kind of tee this up so people know, how did you get into the pastor world? How did all that happen for you?
Yeah, so Brian, I've been in ministry for almost 20 years now. Hard to believe. And I started a church. We had 8 people in my living room, and we grew it to, it's hard to believe, we grew it to over, my ex-husband and I grew it to over, 1,300 people. We had hundreds of volunteers. Not an easy thing to do. Well, we got divorced 4 years ago, and so I had to make a pivot in my career. And so what I started doing was consulting with senior pastors, consulting with their church, with their leadership team, and then working with companies all about leadership. Because if you transform and grow yourself, you know, Brian, as a leader, and if you can learn how to develop your team, it transforms everything. I mean, there's nothing more important as a leader than creating change, either in our church or in our business. And so it's been quite a journey, but I'm so grateful for what I do now. I do about 70% work with churches and 30% with companies that really want to see change and have a great impact.
I love that. And well, it's not easy. When you talked about starting in your living room, and I remember some of those church plants and things that would start, what were some of the lessons that you learned? I mean, starting from that small of a group, around 8 or so, and then growing that, what would be some of the biggest lessons that you learned through that?
It's a great question, Brian. I think that the greatest lesson that I learned is that, even John Maxwell talks about this, everything rises and falls on leadership. But the more that I dug into developing myself, spending the money and the time and the energy to figure out what I needed to do to increase my leadership capacity, my leadership lid, you know, I started being able to develop other leaders, develop our team, and then attract leaders that wanted to stay, that wanted to follow us, that wanted to be a part of what we were doing. And so I think that's number one, is just developing myself as a leader, and then learning how to get a whole entire team to volunteer, to buy into, you know, there's a lot of churches, a lot of companies, there's a lot of different things you can be a part of. And so what I had to figure out was, why does our mission matter? Why does what we're building as a church, or, you know, why does it matter? Why would they give their life to be a part of it? Why would they stay? And I had to learn how to identify leaders and how to get them in the right seat. I mean, and that's just Jim Collins' good to great, you know, who before what. And so I think that's it, Brian. I think that a lot of, small businesses, small churches don't grow because the leader's not developing themselves, and then they are not learning how to develop a high impact team.
I love that. Now I'm going to jump back into that. Does my mission matter? Because that's one of the notes I wrote down here from your talk. But I want to talk about that law of the lid, because that's been one, like, I've personally experienced it, and I've seen in my career too. We've had leaders on our team, and they might be a 5 or 6 today. And they're like, man, I really want to recruit this person or that person. I want to attract these great, 8, 9s, and 10s out there. And they don't realize to that point, like, you're probably not attracting those, and you're probably not getting them to join your team if they see the lack of value. They don't see that you're the best person to help them grow. So tell me about from some of the practical aspects, because you mentioned a couple great books. Sometimes that flies by people, but if I'm wanting to increase my leadership capacity and move up kind of that law of the lid, what are some tactical ways that you've seen that done or you'd recommend?
So I think that there are 3 resources that every single leader must have. You must read Jim Collins' Good to Great. I don't know how you would ever build a church or an organization without knowing Good to Great, your team knowing Good to Great, frontwards, backwards. I've read that book 10 times, highlighted it, underlined it. We've taken our team through it through years. Becoming a level 5, and you'll learn what that is if you read the book, Good to Great Leader. Servant leadership is absolutely critical. You cannot build, Brian, you cannot build an organization without it. So that would be one thing, is that we have got to read that book. I joke and I say I have 2 JCs in my life, Jesus Christ and Jim Collins, and you can't really do life or grow your business or grow your church without either one of those. And then 2 things that I have found really helpful is John Maxwell has the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And he has these PDFs where you can, it's like the cliff notes of exercises and conversations you can have with your team. And then there's 17 indisputable laws of teamwork. So I would say those 3 things you have got to implement. And then another thing, Brian, is you have got to know, like golfing. I don't golf. You golf, Brian?
I do not, but I go just to take part.
Okay. So I tried to learn how to golf to fit in with, people in our church years ago, and it failed. But Daniel Goleman, who developed the 4 areas of emotional intelligence, did research of more than 3,000 executives, Brian, and he identified the 6 leadership styles that every single leader must have and must be able to use. Kind of like when you golf, you have to be able to use your driver and your putter, and that's about all I can name. But there's 6 leadership styles you have to be able to use to win the game of leadership. And each one of these styles is tied to a different area of emotional intelligence. And so as a leader, you must know which style of leadership to use on each different single person in your organization and when you need to use them. And so he did the research and talked about how the article that he wrote for Harvard Business Review was called Leadership That Gets Results. And so you've got to know how to get results in your organization and your personal leadership. And I have found that just absolutely critical and pivotal. It's what I teach pastors. It's what I teach business leaders. It's what I teach leaders. They say you have to know what your best style of leadership is, and then you have to know which one you want to work on, because it really impacts your team.
Yeah, huge. Well, you're going through that, and I remember back. So I worked at Wells Fargo for 13 years, and most people know, like, Good to Great, obviously in there. It was a required reading, right? And multiple times, and we would break it down. And so when you're bringing up some of that, like level 5 leaders, that was always the aspiration. Like, how do we get to that level? What does that level look like?
Yes.
And I love listening to you, because any leader out there, aspiring leader listening to the show, listen to the way that Nicole is breaking these down. Like, she understands the concept. She understands them in practice. And I think for a lot of people, they just want to skip past the steps and often find, like, man, I just want to have a massive team. I want to have the best people in the world. I just want it to all magically happen. And they forget the decades, sometimes decades of work on themselves to go through this. And so you're listening to books, and I love that, because I think that's a practical way. Guys, I would write down those books. I would go find them, the PDF versions. I love Maxwell, of course. I mean, that's one of the, I'd say, the godfather there.
Yes.
If you're not studied up on it, it's a common language in business and relationships that what I have found by reading those and having that understanding, you can bring up a concept like law of the lid, right? And you can actually talk about, what does a level 5 leader look like? So leaders, don't let that skip by you. What Nicole just shared, rewind it back, write that down. That's an actionable item. So I got to go back to this. This is the first thing I wrote down. When you spoke to the group, you said, does your mission matter? And I mean, I was taken back for a second. I was like, okay, certain parts of my life, does my mission matter? Like, it makes sense there. Unpack that for people, because I think this is where most companies, it's why they don't have the engagement. It's why the leader probably just shows up and goes through the motions, right? But let's talk about, does my mission matter? What does that even mean?
Yes. So, Brian, your mission, and Simon Sinek talks about this, right? In his famous TED Talk, Start With Why. And he wrote a book on it. And he talks about how we have 3 concentric circles in our organization, with the center and the most important being why. Why do we exist? Why does your mission matter? And Brian, there's a lot of bosses, there's a lot of managers, okay? There's not a lot of leaders. And what a leader does is inspire a team, inspire a group of people to why their mission matters. Brian, I don't know what the stats are, but it's like 1 in a trillion chance that we even get to be alive, that we get to be humans. And so if you are going to lead an organization, you're going to lead a church, it absolutely is your responsibility to communicate an organization and to create an environment that is worthy of people giving their time and their energy and their efforts away from their family and any other things that we could do. And so when I say, does your mission matter? Doesn't matter. Is it worth asking yourself and people, leaders, team members to give their lives to? And if you're not willing to do what you do, no matter how much it costs, then why are we doing it? If the mission and your why doesn't matter, isn't going to make an impact, then why do that business? Why lead that team? It's got to be more than making money. It's got to be more than the bottom line. Because there's a lot of different ways to make money. But if we're going to be leaders and we're going to, start a business and lead a team, we've got to really understand why what we do is important.
Yeah. I actually had this conversation the other day, and I was thinking about this as we were prepping for the call and all that. And I was talking to one of our executive leaders on our team as well, and just kind of give people real life example into it, right? So I started and originated mortgages and helped people buy homes. And originally my mission was, hey, we didn't have the best experience buying our home. I wanted to change that, and I wanted to help people that didn't have access to the information or access to people they could trust. I said, look, I'm going to be that person. I'm going to go out and educate people, whether they choose me or not, doesn't matter. If they do choose me, they have such a great experience that they tell everybody, and they don't end up like most. They buy a home, they have the regret, and it's painful in this experience. But through my career, what we found the other day, we had this conversation about, now that we're leading teams and we're growing the organization, it is really about changing people's lives. And I've realized our real mission now for us on the executive team is to help people find really what matters to them, and to make sure they don't sacrifice results on the business scoreboard for results at home or in their health, both mental and physical, just making sure that people are cared for. And so just an interesting conversation, because I knew we were prepping for this. So I'd love for you to talk about that. I don't know if that resonates, but as leaders, my role, I have found it evolves and shifts as the team's needs and the business evolves and shifts. And so am I going down the right path? Does that make sense? What are your thoughts?
So when I think about casting vision, which is the number one leadership style that has the greatest impact on our organization, vision is a combination of communicating our mission, our culture, and our strategy. And I teach, pastors and leaders that we have to know who to communicate with, where to communicate with them, how to communicate, and how to communicate. Where do we do all those things? And one of the things that we have to do, Brian, is you can't do it with everyone in your organization, but you have got to do it with 3 to 12 people where you are doing one-on-ones with, where you are getting to know them, you are investing in them, you are helping them, you understand what do they love, what do they care about, who are they, and then how is there a partnership? Because that's really what we're doing with our employees, right? With our executive team, is we are asking them to partner with us, to partner with our organization, right? To combine their mission and their life with the mission of our organization to produce impact. But you can't do that if you don't know your people. You can't do that if you're not having conversations and understanding where their heart is and what matters to them. But if we'll get good at knowing our people, at knowing our team, at knowing who's working for us, and helping them connect the dots of what their purpose is and what the purpose and the mission is of our organization, they'll give you everything they've got, Brian. They'll do whatever it takes to see that come to pass, because you've communicated to them what that partnership is all about.
I love that. So I wrote down that mission, culture, and strategy. Yeah. And we have really intentionally gone back into what is a culture of winning. So we talk about that. What does that mean? What does that look like for everybody out on the battlefield, as we call it? And you mentioned the one-on-ones. And so I don't want that to go by people, because I know early in my journey And I would say even as a manager, right? Because I really was learning leadership at that time. I would put myself in the camp of manager. You're told, hey, do one-on-ones, do one-on-ones. And we hear that all the time, and spend time with your team. Is there any framework that you use so that people actually have an effective time? And it's not just, hey, Nicole, we're going to meet today, we're going to meet next week, and we're just going to wing it, which is what I've had leaders, managers do. What is the right framework to make sure that time's of value?
Absolutely, Brian. So most important is consistency. Okay, so whether it's 30 minutes once a week, an hour once a week, 30 minutes once every 2 weeks, it has got to be a non-negotiable that you have this meeting. So that's number one. And then when you're in this meeting, casting vision, like I said, has the greatest impact on your organization. And so every single meeting, every single opportunity, you have to cast vision. So you have to do that in your one-on-ones. So the 3 things that you have to do is, number one, how are you? You've got to just check in with people and say, how are you? As a leader, we can drive people or we can lead them. And the only way to lead people is to know where they're at, go there, and then walk them and lead them to where you want them to go. But you first have to identify, where are people at? Just how are they doing in their life? Like, what's on their mind?
Yes.
And just caring for them in that way. So if that takes up the whole 30 minutes or the whole hour, great. But we have to start there. And then, the second part is the culture piece. So in our organization, we get what we tolerate and we get what we celebrate. And so you want to have a time where you're meeting with your leaders and you are celebrating the things that you see them doing, the decisions that you see them making that are contributing to the kind of culture that you want to create, or things that you're seeing them saying and doing that are not contributing to the culture, right? And then the third thing is we have to hold them accountable to the strategy, what we need them to do to accomplish the wins and the goals of our organization and team. So you have to do one-on-ones. And in that one-on-one, you have to say, how are you doing? Here's what you're doing, the culture that you're helping us to create. And then what are your goals? What is your strategy? What do I need you to be doing? I've got to hold you accountable and make sure that it is so clear exactly what I need you to do to move the needle forward. So those are 3 things you can do in your one-on-ones.
I love that, and I know it's called seasons in my career, right? That I would be working with people myself, or I'd have leaders in my life, and they would skip past 1 or 2 of those, right? And you leave the meeting and you're like, I don't really know. That was kind of a waste of time and what's there. And as you said that, I thought about my coach that I've been working with for a couple of years that has just been phenomenal in my life. We always start with, hey, how are you? How's the family? How are the kids doing? Hey, and he always, of course, did you have any soccer this weekend? Just opening up. And so everyone listening, don't miss that, because I will tell you, I think that's actually the opening of the gateway. So then when we move into the conversation about we're casting vision, we're talking about strategy, we're talking about accountability, all these things there, I'm already open to that because I'm in a trusting environment. And I give you that as just real life, like going through that myself every week. Because if we skip past that part and just jumped in and say, okay, hey, Brian, we're going to talk about this week. It's like, I don't think that lands. So I love what you said there. Here's something I was going to ask you, and this is getting into like really tactical things. And I've started to do this. I recognized in my own pattern, I wasn't taking really good notes in some of these meetings as well, right? So I would leave and I go on to the next thing, and I mean well to come back and do that. I have a lot of leaders, but what I noticed, my coach was actually working with me on this, is, hey, are you taking notes through the meeting and after? So that way, when you set up the next week's meeting, you just have everything that you went through and you can just recap and move in. So thoughts on that? And
Yes.
Okay. That has helped me tremendously.
So it's so important, Brian, because we like to think that we remember every single part of every single meeting. You're not going to remember. You've got too many people to lead. So here's what I teach leaders how to do. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's an app called Trello.
Yep.
I love Trello. Here's how I use Trello. Sam Chan says our size and our speed are determined by our systems and our structure. So Trello is one of the things that I use to systematize how I'm developing people. So Trello has a board, and on every single board, there's columns, right? And if you imagine, a column has Post-it notes on every single column. It's like a list. And so what I do is I have a list of all of the leaders the organizations, the churches that I work with. And after every single meeting, I'm going into their card, I'm going into Trello, and I'm just doing a voice memo. Everybody has their iPhone or their Android. You open up your voice memos and you just do a 1-minute recap of your last meeting. Okay. And then you save that to your Trello board, and then you take notes on some of the important action items that you talked about, so that when you go to your next meeting, you're able to listen to that. It's not a 5-minute voice memo. It's a 1-minute voice memo to refresh your mind of where you left off in the last meeting. And then important parts of the conversation. People are going to share their kids, their goals, what's going on. And if they've shared it once, we need to remember it, but you can't remember everything. But if you keep all of those notes in an organized place, which I have found Trello to be the thing that has been the most effective for me, it's not the only option, but it's an option. So that's what I tell leaders to do, to organize the people on their team.
Man. And those are like the little things along the way that I think people miss. We want this like huge, I'll call it the grand slam effect, right? That everybody's like, man, I'm just going to come up there, bases are loaded. I'm just going to hit that one hit wonder. Everybody's going to score. It's going to be magical. And it's like, and these little things that you stack up and you shift in your meetings. So if you're not taking notes today, you're not using an app like Trello. I do love voice memos as well. I'll just tell you, for me, it's really simple. And now so many technologies that can convert your voice memo to text, right? And so there's really no excuse today for not taking notes, not being prepared. And I love what you said about your systems. I had a coach tell me that we don't rise to the level of our goals. We actually fall to the level of our systems.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, man, I got to work on my systems, right? So let's talk about that for leaders. What are some other systems and some things to help them stay organized? As you know, I find that with a lot of good intentions, maybe they're getting their one-on-ones right. They've listened to this. They're like, okay, I can do my one-on-ones. I can use Trello. I can take notes. I can start with, hey, how are you doing? I can move into the vision and strategy. What are the other strategies you've seen? And I wrote down this. You talked about high impact leaders. What are they doing that makes them separate to be a real high impact leader today?
Well, of course, Brian, it starts with us. So we've got to have a system that we have operating in our life as leaders. If we're going to produce a high impact team, we have to be high performers. So one of my favorite practical things that I use in my life and I tell leaders to use is Brendan Burchard. I'm sure you're familiar. He has his high performance planner. Okay. And so he did research and study what are the habits that high performers have. And so he has this planner, and it creates a framework, a structure in the beginning of your day and at the end of your day, at the end of your week, at the beginning of your month, where you evaluate what are the habits that you're doing well in and what are the habits that you need to work on to become a high performer so that you can produce a high impact team. And so that's just a practical system that I use in my life and I tell leaders to use. You've got to be reflecting in the morning. You've got to be setting up your day for success. You've got to be reflecting at night. You've got to be reviewing your week. You've got to be thinking about the month ahead. And so it's a small thing, but it's a necessary thing for us to do as leaders.
I love it. And there's almost this misnomer I hear from people out there, and you even shared some of the stats about millennials and Gen Z and all this. And we think people want to be left alone, right? And I think about that often as leaders. They're like, I'm just going to hire great people. I'm going to get out of their way. I've heard that. I'm just going to leave them alone. But I love how you dug into this. And I don't subscribe to that, because I do think, yes, there are times that they want to be left alone, but you talked about the importance of those monthly and even weekly meetings with them. Can you touch on that? Because I think a lot of people I hear this even, man, I'm just going to hire great people and I'm just going to get out of the way. Like, really? I don't know a great coach in my life that, with soccer, for example, that just brought on the best players and said, okay, guys, hey, you run practice, you review the film. You can actually pick the starting lineup next week. That'll be awesome. And I'll just, you have questions and stuff, you know where to find me, right? Like,
yeah.
That is not how it works.
No, it doesn't. Okay, Brian, most high performers are pace setters. Okay, we don't need anybody telling us what to do and how to do it. We're going to motivate ourselves. We're going to get up early. We're going to do the workouts. We're going to do the planner. And pace setter is one of the leadership skills, the styles that you need to have to produce a high impact team. Okay, but that pace setter leadership style only works on people that are high performers, highly competent. And so, yes, with those people, we need to check in with them, but they're going to run. They're at the top of their game. They're the best of the best. But Brian, I've got some bad news. It's only 20% of people are high performers. The rest of the 80%, we must develop. And the reality is to develop people to become high performers, we have to develop that skill of being able to coach them. And I think that most leaders, it would be easy to lead a team of 20 executives, right? 20 team members that are high performer, that they're just gonna move the needle forward, and you just have to. But that's not leadership, Brian. Leadership is coming alongside people and developing them. And 80% of our team, we have got to develop. I say, give me the challenging people. Give me the people that need a coach, because I don't want to be known as a great boss. I don't want to be known as a great manager. I want to be a great leader, and great leaders have the ability to take people from where they're at to where they're called to be, where their potential is. And so you have to develop people. 60% of Gen Z say that they will stay in an organization with, even if they're not making the most amount of money, if they have a leader that they feel personally cares about them, that is invested in their personal development. And you can't do that with everybody in your organization, but you can create a culture where doing one-on-ones and developing leaders, starting with you and your team, has a trickle effect to the rest of your organization.
That gets me fired up, because I know my own life. Like, I have stayed in roles and stayed at companies for that very reason. I had a great leader, great mentor. Someone was there. I felt challenged. I'm like, you know what? I do know I'm going to get better. And that is, and I love when you share those stats too. And then also focusing on that 80%. And, something I was looking at the other day, and I know we'll touch on this brand builder stuff and building your brand in a second, but I thought about the other day, Rory and AJ and all those, the crew at Brand Builders, and then also Elle, who we work with, talked about the biggest testimonials you can get is from your existing team. And I thought about, as you were saying that, is the people that you've moved from point A to point B. You've helped them accomplish their dreams. And a lot of people, they want to build these exceptional teams, but they've never really taken anybody from point A to point B.
That's right.
And I started to look back over the last several years and got very intentional about that. And we created wins. And as a leader, that is the most rewarding thing. I'll just say, like, when you've helped somebody achieve a goal, whatever it is, many times it's tied to monetary. Sometimes, I've got people like, they want to travel more. They want to buy a vacation home, whatever it is. They want a better quality of life. Many of them, actually, leaders miss this. They wanted just a better confidence level. And we attacked that through working out and mental toughness things that we did. And, those are the stories. So what do you think about, as leaders today, having the results matters, right? Because I hear a lot of people talking about, they just want to be a great leader, and they're reading all the books, they're doing all these things. But at some point, you got to have some results, right? You got to have some testimonials. Say, like, when you go into a church, you're like, hey, I've done these things before. I'm qualified now to help you. How much does the results matter for leadership today?
Well, you have to have results. So Pastor Nicole coming in here hot. So Saul and Barnabas. Okay, we don't talk about Barnabas enough. We don't talk about the leaders that God places in people's lives to develop them. The Apostle Paul wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, Brian. But he didn't start there. He started with Barnabas, who was his pastor, who was his leader, that spent an enormous amount of time, years, Brian, developing the Apostle Paul to become the great leader that he was. Saul got saved, and then he spent a lot of time with Ananias, and he spent a lot of time with Barnabas to grow. And so what did he do? He wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, and he went on 3 missionary trips. He established, the first church in Europe. He established, churches in Ephesus and Galatia and Thessalonica. And so that's great. And because of what Barnabas did with the Apostle Paul, I guarantee you every single leader in Jerusalem was saying, go to Barnabas, go to Barnabas, go to Barnabas. Yeah. He's going to produce you. He's going to develop you. He's going to encourage you. And it's incredibly important, Brian, because when the Apostle Paul talked about the churches, he says, you are my living epistles. You are my letters of recommendation. He boasted about not what he was called to, but about the people that he was called to, what they had been doing in their life. And so we must be able to point to people on our team and our organization and and point to like, this is what I've been able to do. And if I can do it for them, I can do it for you. And that motivates us, Brian. We all have a calling from God to produce impact. And one of the things that motivates me to continue to work with pastors, to work with churches, to work with business leaders and entrepreneurs is I have seen the results in their life. I have seen the impact. And Brian, the truth is, Moses said he was the most humble man in all the earth. Okay. That sounds like a pretty proud statement. But the truth is, if you're Kobe, you got to know you're Kobe. Otherwise, you won't take a shot. And
That's
so
right.
you've got to know the results that you are called to, and you're able and you are competent to affect and change in people's lives. Otherwise, you won't have the boldness and the confidence to say, hey, sign up for my program, bring me in to do the work. Look at what I've done for other people. And we have to say those things, and we have to know those things, and we have to point to those things. If we believe in our mission, if we believe in the impact that we're called to make, because it's not about us, but it's about what God has called us to do and the contribution we are called to make to have the greatest impact. And that starts with the people that we're called to help.
Boom. That's straight fire. So you're going to rewind that. Listen to that a few times. I'm literally like, that is so good. And the passion at which you deliver it and where you are. And you had me thinking about, I had a mentor of mine, and I stumbled through this, guys, like full transparency of like, I knew there were things that I was doing well, but I wouldn't own it and I wouldn't tell people about it. And he's basically one day, he's like, Brian, why are you hiding your gifts? And he hit me between the eyes. He's like, you're being really selfish. And that's one of those words where I'm like, ooh, that's kind of like a trigger word. Like, I don't want to be selfish. Like, what do you mean being selfish? Like, if you have something that you can help someone else, are you really going to keep that from people you care about? No, you're going to tell them. You're not going to be selfish. And so for anybody listening and you listen to what Nicole just shared, take through that lens that I did. I went through that very big transformation of, man, I'm not going to keep things that are good. I'm not going to keep my gifts locked down and in hiding. And so you want to share those as you go forward. And that's just a word of encouragement for anybody out there. And you're like, I do know that I'm good at these things, but I don't know how to get out there and start sharing them. Don't be selfish. Get out there and share them. And that's where I do believe God's opened doors. I know in your life, and I shared in my life. And a lot of times on the show, we'll share these things of, it's just that one person, that one door. And you're like, you just had the confidence. Okay, God, I'm going to trust you. We're going to go this way.
Yes.
Just lead the way, but we're going to go that way. And so I love that. And I don't want to forget this, because you talked, and a lot of people are going to be taking notes going through this. I want to give them some resources after. You were telling me earlier, you're going to have this Catch the Vision workshop coming up. Tell me a little about that. And if you know how people can get involved in it, how that's going to start to play out.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things to do with churches and companies is the Catch the Vision workshop and Catch the Vision summits. Brian, if we can get our team to catch the vision, okay, here's what I mean. We have got to be able to communicate our vision, which is Simon Sinek, those concentric circles. We have to start with why, our culture, and our strategy. Well, if you turn those concentric circles into a megaphone, we've got to be able to shout and communicate and cast the vision, which is our mission, our culture, and our strategy. We've got to be able to communicate a vision in such a clear and compelling way that our team members, that our church or organization can catch, so to speak. Because if they don't catch the vision, they're not going to be able to run with the vision. Kind of like a football team, they've got to know, where are we going? Why is it important that we go there? And then they're going to be willing to do whatever it takes. And so at these Catch the Vision workshops, these Catch the Vision retreats, I come alongside pastors and leaders and executives and help them cast and communicate the vision of their church, of their team, of the organization in such a clear and compelling way that every single person catches it, understands why we exist, what our culture is, what their part to play is in it. It's just one of my most favorite things to do for teams.
I love that. So I want to make sure we plugged it, and then we're going to put some links to all of that, guys. We'll make sure that you've got Nicole's links there, but you also shared with me, you've got a text code. If they text LEAD to 33777. I love the 777 there. And if you've got questions and all of those things, guys, we're going to put Nicole's information. You can connect up with her on social, but want to make sure that you had a taste today. I mean, we could go on and on, because I know I love this. I look forward to just having these great conversations, because I'm over here making notes. I'm learning as I go through, and we just scratch the surface, I know, of all of the information and how you can help people. And I do believe leadership, companies rise and fall on this. Families rise and fall on this. Churches rise and fall. Teams rise and fall on this. Guys, this is not going anywhere, right?
Yes.
Leadership is here to stay. And the sooner we embrace it and get the skills and go on that mission, I always say, start training every day, the better we can become. So let's give us a final word. What have we left out, or what would you share with people? I love this one of, if you were to have that one truth that you shared with people and you said, okay, out of all the work and everything you've learned, what is kind of that one truth that you would share with people?
This is what I would share, Brian. I would say that Jesus showed up on the scene saying, the Spirit of the Lord has anointed me to do this thing. The Apostle Paul, when he wrote his letters to the church in the New Testament, he said, hi, my name is Paul. I'm an apostle of Jesus Christ. We must know who we are and what we are called to do. And we cannot show up in our life, in our organization, in our family, on our teams, if we don't know exactly who we are and exactly what we are called to do to make an impact. And so I would say, if you are a leader, if you are a pastor, you must be completely bought into and convinced of who you are and what you're called to do. Because if you don't know that, people aren't going to follow you. You have to know who you are and where you're going if you're going to inspire and lead a team to come with you.
Damn. That is what we talk about, the attractive leadership model. And I know we jived on that right away. So this has been a true gift. Thank you for investing time with us. Before we wrap, where can people find you on social? Because I know they're going to want to go find you on Instagram and other places there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Connected with Nicole is my Instagram. And if they will text that lead to 33777, I'm going to send them the Harvard Business Review article and a link for them to take a leadership assessment so that they can identify their top leadership style, the style that they need to grow in. And then there's a link to set up a call with me if they're interested in getting to know me more. But Connected with Nicole is my Instagram, and that's where they can find me.
I love it. I cannot wait to follow your journey as you go forward. I know God has big things for you, and you're making an impact, and I believe that's going to continue to grow. And so, guys, this has been phenomenal. Make sure you like, you subscribe, leave us a comment. If there's been something today that has really resonated with you, or you said, man, I needed this today, give us that feedback. We love to see the comments there. Send us a DM. Let us know how this has impacted you and how we can support your journey, because that's why the show's created. We don't have any sponsors. We don't do that fancy stuff there. This is really about making an impact and bringing great conversations to you. And that is all about finding your competitive edge. And so thank you for tuning in today. Leave us that comment. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Cheers.